Okay, this is the February. If you want to have conversations, please go outside. This is the February 12th, 2020 meeting of the Planning, Economic Development, and Land Use Committee. Council members, committee members present are Tom Hoey, Judy Doche, and myself, Kathy Fahey. Other council members present, Ginny Farrell and Sonia Frederick. We're here tonight to discuss Local Law B of 2020 and also resolution, I'll read that, Local Law B of 2020, a local law creating, Mike, are you staying in for
I'm
that?
going to
Also
but I'll get out of your way.
Present is Mike O'Brien. A local law creating Chapter 376 of the Code of the City of Albany, community choice aggregation, authorizing the creation of a community choice aggregation program and adopting certain provisions to facilitate program implementation. So we'll start with that, and then we'll also be discussing Resolution 921-20R, which is a resolution adopting community choice aggregation program, education and outreach plan, and customer opt-out letter. All right, well, welcome everybody. I know a lot of you have been hearing about community choice aggregation. We've been talking about it for the past year, about the past year. We passed a resolution encouraging the city to go forward and look really carefully at this. It's an opportunity to, have more renewable energy sources for people's electricity here in the city of Albany, both residents and small businesses. So the local law that is before us is this will create an implementation plan and the ability for the city to go forward. We have a contract with a not-for-profit called Mega Energy to do education and outreach on the program, and they've already begun that. And we've invited them here tonight to give us an update about how that's going. So I'm going to invite Louise Gava up from Mega Energy, and she's going to give us an update on the implementation. You're welcome to sit. You're welcome to stand, whatever you're comfortable with. Oh, and we also have Chris Spencer from the Planning Department here in the City of Albany. Chris, if you could come up too, we appreciate it. Chris is the city's liaison to the community choice aggregation program process.
Okay, so I think the first high-level update is just a reminder that Albany is one of 13 municipalities and representing 90,000 households across the capital region that are investigating CCA. No one is committed at this point. I know that all of you, at least on this committee, and most of you in this room have seen this little 7 steps piece, and it's critical because I want to remind us that we're only at step 2. So we're doing education right now. I believe Michelle graciously photocopied for all of you the misnamed education outreach plan, because it's not actually, we originally used it as a planning tool, but really what it is acting as now is a documentation of all of the scheduled or educational activities that have happened. And so I just want to point out to you that we're working hard to get in various neighborhood association meetings. There are 1, 2, 3,
And that's
4,
in your
5,
packet
6.
here.
There are 6 more neighborhood associations that in the last 24 hours have requested meetings. So Facebook, it's doing its job, spreading conspiracy and encouraging public participation, so that's great. We have also been in the libraries. We're using Facebook a lot. We are having trouble getting press. I will be honest with that. I think the national news is eclipsing us a little bit. So anything we can do to try to get that, any thoughts that you have on getting this picked up is critical. And then we're using the radio. We're using, Channel Albany, YouTube. So lots of different things. Again, your idea is welcome here. This is just literally this particular part of the education. The state requires it to be 60 days, and multiple methods of outreach, and this is really just for inclusion in the RFP process. This is not the end of the education at all. There's actually a step if the city decides to go forward of additional education. So the other thing I want to tell you is sort of what happens next. Again, you're moving towards a March 2nd potential passage of a local law. The critical element of that local law is you are not obliged to do CCA. It does not tie you to MEGA. It is literally giving you the opportunity to participate in a bid. That is what it is doing. And so that's key. It's not a done deal at that point. The part that it does become real is actually not until May, this step 5, and that's after the bids come back in. That's after we make a recommendation, we do the analysis, we compare historic pricing to the pricing proposed for the CCA, we look at percentage renewables, all of that. So that's not until May, and that would be the point where the city has to actually decide, yes, we offer this to our residents, or no, we don't. And if we do, what is the default option that you want to offer? The other thing I want to point out is if you do that, then there's another 60 days of education. That's when we actually know the price, the term, the source. It's a lot easier, I think, to engage with residents when it's not a concept, but it's an actual thing. So hopefully that's our experience in other communities. So the other thing I would point out is that the actual opt-out period, right? So every eligible customer, so everyone who's with National Grid now would be automatically eligible as long as they're not a HEAP enrolled customer. And so they would get an opt-out letter in the mail, telling them about this program, and then they would have the opportunity over a 30-day period to mail in a card, to make a phone call, to go online and opt out. Okay, that will not happen on our timeline right now. That's not until July to August. Okay, so we're still talking, this is a very future, this is quite an extensive period, so there's lots of time to engage with your residents and make sure folks understand the process and they understand their options. The other things I want to address, a couple things. I know there's been some concerns about HEAP eligible or HEAP enrolled customers not being able to participate in the CCA. That is the state's parameters for CCA, and it's based on the subsidy that they're already getting for their utilities. So what we're doing is we're co-marketing at all of our neighborhood sessions and all of our meetings a program that they can access, which is basically free negative dollar signs on their bill, and it's called Solar for All. And so this is, the state has bought solar energy, and they literally, if someone's enrolled in HEAP or SNAP or receives SSI, they can literally, they're already eligible for basically free negative $5 to $15 a month on their utility bill. So we're trying to get as many people in Albany enrolled in that program as possible because we recognize we want this to work for everyone. And a couple other things I want to just stress before I take your questions. One, there's been some rumors going on Facebook. There's never a fee to opt out. Okay, never at all. Not during this 30-day period at number 6 and never through the rest of the program. That's one of the things that the CCA negotiates, and that's one of the values of the CCA versus going into the market yourself. So that's critical. And then the other piece that's critical is around data security. MEGA will not actually have the account numbers of your residents. We will not have their telephone number. We will have the absolute minimum information that is needed to do this program, which includes their name and address to mail them those letters, right? So we have had to follow very strict data security protocols that the state and National Grid both have to sign off on. So I can guarantee you that we have checked those boxes because we're not allowed to have the data if we have not. So I know that's been a concern as well. And then the only other thing I want to say to you before I take questions is that, Judy, I really appreciate all of your detailed analysis and questions. And for anyone that wants to sit down one-on-one and dive into the weeds, I am happy to do that because there are a lot of other documents that relate to this program that we don't necessarily talk about in a meeting every day like this. So I welcome that. Yes.
Thank you, Louise. And one of the things I just want to say that I neglected to mention, there is going to be public comment at the end of this committee meeting, but I do want to point out there will be a public hearing that is tentatively scheduled on February 20th. So you will have an opportunity to comment at that time as well. Why don't we start and go around and if anyone has questions about the local law that we're looking at tonight. Mike?
Can somebody opt out at any time into the contract? They don't have to be in it for a year?
Correct. Correct.
And
Well, hang on, let me just clarify why that's confusing. So, this initial, that 30 days I was talking about, that's opt-out, like, I don't want to leave National Grid, I don't want anything to do with this program. They have 30 days and nothing will happen to them if they opt out. After that period, we're assuming that they didn't opt out, they're gonna go into the program, that's the structure. So they move into the program, they can opt out at any time without a fee, but it just will take a month until National Grid, makes the change.
And I thought you said that at some point in time before we as a council, we're going to be quoted rates.
Yes.
And how long are those rates good for?
So that will depend on the market. And I explained this this was your question as well, Judy, which is that almost every CCA in New York State has been 2 years. There's a lot of reasons for that. So I think we'll be around a 2-year term, but we won't know, we'll base that on what the best value is. So maybe it's 18 months, maybe it's 22 months. It'll depend on the pricing we get, what we recommend. But it won't be, we don't ask in the RFP, the longest contract we ask for pricing for is 36 months. And in our last contract, in our last RFP, that was not a good value.
So the legal contract is going to be a 3-year contract?
Less than 3 years.
Oh, okay. And you're going to quote prices, but how long are you guaranteeing those prices?
It's fixed for the entire term. Yep, that's what makes it better than some of the other things where it's fixed for 3 months and then it goes up, or that's what the power of aggregation does. It allows us to fix it for that time, yeah.
Except that the biggest consumers aren't even included.
Because they already have the market clout, and that's why New York State is offering this program and created this program for residents, because residents as individuals in the market can't negotiate these kind of rates and they can't get these kind of terms. The large commercial and industrial customers have been doing these programs for years with success.
And then one other final question. The National Grid bill is broken down into 2 parts. The part that the energy cost
Yes.
and the delivery charge.
Yes.
Will National Grid be charging an increased delivery cost for your electricity?
No, they cannot. So the delivery, you are correct. So the CCA is only about the supply. The delivery will still be National Grid. There will be one bill, will still be National Grid, and that delivery rate is set through a rate case about every 3 years. National Grid can't just raise those rates. That is a regulated process where it's an 11-month process that they go through, and we are not in the middle of one of those.
And right now, gas is not included, right?
Correct.
We're just doing electricity.
That's right. We are only talking about electricity. It is possible to do gas, but we're not talking about doing gas right now.
So if I can jump in here, you said that you're willing to talk to me, get
Yes.
into the weeds.
Yes.
The questions I'm asking are very specific about, geared towards some things that I see in the materials, that I read in the materials, that I think that people would take solace in actually seeing it in the legislation. And I don't really think that that's your role. I really
Sure.
think that that's the role of the committee and the council to address in making some specific changes to this legislation. I'm not really looking for a lot of changes
Sure.
to this legislation, but one of them would be specifically to include some language that specifically says that customers have the ability to opt out at any time without penalty. Because it's one thing for us to say that generally, it's another thing to say, and what we adopted as a council protects that right for you. So that's one of the things that I have suggested.
I think if you do put that in there, I would suggest that at least there's a provision that explains that there may be a bit of a lag if they opt out after that 30 days. So it might take a little time for that billing cycle to get them out. Just, I think it's important if you're going to put that in there to make sure that people understand that it's not instantaneous.
And the other thing, and I don't know, I think you all have been shared the implementation plan now, and that's the plan that Mega had to put together that's really talking about the details of how this program works. And so our structure, and you're welcome to, you and with your counsel, legal counsel are welcome to change the law however you want. That implementation plan is those details, because working with Mega versus working with another administrator or 2 or 5 years from now, the structure of CCA could change. And we don't know how. And so the local law is written in a way that it is the things that are core to the program. The implementation plan is all the details that fill that out. So like in the implementation plan, it explicitly says customers can opt out, and the no termination fee is not actually a given, but it's something that we negotiate and has always happened, right? So some of these things, putting them in your local law may or may not, we wouldn't necessarily advise, because it could change, and that's fine if you want to put your local law as it's going to be and then know that you might have to change your local law, that's fine. It's all a matter of how you do your local laws in the city, and I don't know.
I see it as the local law not only sets forth the program, but also sets forth certain protections that provide people certain assurances with
Sure.
how this is going to be operated. So that's
Sure.
So that's one of them. The other thing that is not in the local law, and JR, I started drafting something in response to this and found it in my drafts. But one of the things that I have a question about is this local law says that we're supposed to approve the CCA agreement. We did authorize the administration or ask the administration to go ahead and negotiate an agreement, but my question is whether the state statute actually requires the municipal's governing body to approve that particular agreement. If not, then I think that we can, then we don't need to change the legislation. If it does, then I think that we kind of have to retroactively ratify the agreement and keep that kind of language in this local law. So one way or the other, we should be resolving it. I don't so much feel the need to have us approve the CCA agreement as for us to have some level of oversight, and the way this local law is written also does not contain that there is something that suggests that we might have a role with the ECO's approval of the ECO. You were just talking to Mike about the ECO and what that would look like, and I would prefer to see something again in legislation. And I was kind of, for the committee's purposes, I was kind of thinking about something that is sort of like the advice and consent that we give to the mayor, to actually say in the legislation that the CCA will make a recommendation with regard to ESCO that is in the best interest of the residents and consistent with the goals of the program, and that we would be notified of that recommendation at the same time that you would have to provide us with that recommendation at the same time that it's being provided to the mayor. And then the mayor needs to let us know, he or she, whether she's going along with that, and then we would have 30 days or 45 days to take action otherwise with regard to that particular proposal. So I think the goal would be to have us be able, if we find that the rates are not something that is desirable, to make sure that we're in the loop,
Right.
and that we have the ability to act on behalf of residents then at that point. Because as you say, we're not yet to that point.
Right.
And that's when we make the decision. So people are buying into this legislation,
Right.
buying into the educational program based upon certain assumptions. We still need to have a role in that. So that is something else that I would like to see in this legislation.
Well, one of the things that we briefly discussed, I was discussing with the mayor's office, was we have had this committee that has met on a few occasions to move forward in this process, and to the thought of formalizing that committee as an advisory board, and then the council would have representation, our advocates have representation as well as the mayor's
And that's
office.
exactly the other option I was thinking about, because and I would want that committee to actually have at least 3 common council members on it that would then be required to report back to the council. But I would also want to make sure the entire council is receiving notice of the recommendation when it is transmitted too, so that we're not having people meet and saying, oh, well, I forgot to tell you, or,
yeah.
or we don't have time, or
So
it
formalize the
falls
whole
within a
process.
break or something like that, so that there would, the entire council would get that. So I'm good with, just something that makes sure that we are
Okay,
involved
so
in the
maybe we
process.
can bring that back to the mayor and corp council. Chris, do you have any thoughts about any of this?
No, I mean, obviously, we would want our energy manager, when they come on board, to be involved in this as well. So that would be,
And is that happening soon, or?
yes.
Great.
That's great.
I don't know the
But we
dates.
are looking to pass this next Thursday.
Yeah, but I meant in terms of the committee and moving forward and any kind of, looking at any,
So in terms of having
RFPs
the,
or anything like that.
adding this language, Judy, to we could do it for our caucus on the 20th and then review it then? Or we'll need, actually, we talked about having another planning committee meeting on the 20th to go over the,
I would love to see, I think it's a little ambitious to address the education plan and the opt-out letter also before the 20th, and maybe put that on the agenda for March 2nd, but I would love to see us actually go ahead and make some changes to this legislation, provide it to people and track changes, but also then.
okay, why don't we, I agree with that. We'll work on that.
And today's Wednesday.
But there is,
today's
we
Wednesday,
have time
maybe by-
constraints.
By Friday.
We
even.
did talk about the planning committee setting a date on the 20th to meet again. And then we
Right.
could
That would give you
maybe
an
have it done by
opportunity
that time.
get it to the March meeting.
Well, on the 20th, if we meet as a planning committee on the 20th with changes to the legislation that people are basically comfortable with, we can go ahead and actually act on the local law then on the 20th. Unless people make comments at public hearing or whatever that give us pause on it, but that would be my goal, and then do the education resolution maybe at the following meeting.
Is there, as far as the resolution, is that the goal to get that passed as well?
Yeah,
that
we
part
need
of the-
all of, so the things that need to go to the state for approval to include you in the RFP are the local law. However, it's your local law, so whatever changes you want to make are fine. And then the state needs to know that Mega didn't lie, like we've done this education and outreach, right? Like that resolution is to say, yes, they were in our community, they went to these neighborhood associations, they were on Facebook, whatever. So that, and then the draft opt-out letter is showing that, it's a draft. But if you do want to make substantive changes, I encourage you to do them now, because we're going to get approvals, then we fill in the blanks, and then we get a second approval. So substantive changes, it would be better to make on the earlier side, because the review process, the time that the state has to review is longer this time, so it's easier because there's a bunch of things that they require to be included.
The opt-out letter, I have fewer suggestions for, but they're,
clunky.
but the two main ones was, I felt it really needed something to educate people a little bit more upfront about the benefits of this program, why
Okay.
we're doing this, the potential energy savings,
Sure.
et cetera.
Sure.
So that's completely missing in it, and when I read it, my reaction to it, when I read that particular document, it almost sounds like I'm being given this and I really don't know what this is, this is, that much about, unless we're really seeing a significant savings down at the bottom of the letter. And I can see a lot of people feeling kind of almost encouraged based upon that letter, to opt out.
Well, then, we welcome
That
your
was
edits. Please provide edits. We're happy to have them.
I was hoping that you guys.
Well,
would-
we can try.
I mean, something
yeah.
succept in the way of.
Yeah, you
and
want to
here's
keep
the
it.
goal, and here's
It's
one of
already
the
so
things
long,
that
yeah.
happened in the opt-out letter that I did not anticipate.
Mm-hmm.
And that is, it looks like people are going to be provided with an option
Mm-hmm.
to go for a rate
Mm-hmm.
that has 100% renewable energy.
Mm-hmm.
So regardless of what ESCO we contract with, it seems like the expectation is you can go for a rate that has 100% renewable energy, or you can pick the other
Correct.
rate. And I had thought essentially the municipality was going to be selecting the rate, the mix.
Mm-hmm.
Can
You're
you
both
speak to
correct.
that, Louise?
Yeah, you're correct in both, actually. So you're going to pick a default. So you'll say either the default is, the cheapest thing, the default is 100%, or the default is some other thing, percentage renewables between the cheapest and 100%. So the city would pick that default. Every resident would automatically get that default if they participate. However, it's about choice. So if you pick, say, 70% is the cheapest renewable that beats grid's price, and you say that's what we want to do, somebody in Albany can still pick 100%. And the purpose is we're still wanting to use the aggregate to give the value to people that want something slightly different. People can still opt down. If you give a renewable percentage and someone says, I just want to save the maximum I can, they can opt down into that. So what you're picking is the default, that if someone doesn't make another choice, that's what they get. That's what the city is picking. But CCA is not taking away any choices. It's really adding choices. And so that's why that exists.
Okay.
And I know that's confusing, and it's
I
worse.
I almost feel like some people are going to feel like, oh, I need to return this letter.
Oh,
And, so
Right.
that's part of just my gut reaction,
Uh-huh.
reading it with a fresh set of eyes.
yeah.
The fact that this opt down or opt or
Opt up.
up or opt in.
I know it's very confusing in that letter because we have to write it for every option because we don't know what you're going to pick. So it's super confusing.
it says if you wish to purchase at the very end,
Mm-hmm.
towards the very end, and I felt like that should be discussed
Higher up.
earlier. Those are the two
Sure.
significant changes that I would love for somebody to, come up with something that's
Sure.
maybe a little bit different for us than to react to.
Sure. And are you willing to go back and forth just with me generally and then if we come to something that you like, then share with the whole council? I mean, that seems like it might be easier, or do you have a thought?
yeah.
Or
No, I think that's fine. I do think we should
a smaller group?
just take a closer look at this. Judy,
Yeah.
if you have suggestions.
Well, she
and then
just
you
gave
share
them.
with
We're happy to take a
Louise.
crack at it.
Yeah.
Well, right, but put them in writing.
Yeah.
And we can do a draft and then bring it to the council.
Yeah.
But go back and forth over the course of the next week.
The other thing is just a very minor thing. It says, was selected to replace National Grid as your default supplier of electricity. And it's interesting, we're selecting them as your supplier of electricity. That's really the decision, and that default isn't really defined or explained. That word also seemed to be maybe not necessarily clarifying, maybe potentially a little bit confusing. But I'd be glad to do that. But I
Okay.
also would like when we're doing that,
Yeah.
I would like you to be in the loop as
Oh,
well.
We can
I'd
definitely- yeah,
actually
we'll do
like
that. We'll do
Because
that.
I do feel it's very easy for this letter to get too long.
It's already,
Right.
we've had,
As
and we've done this with other municipalities, we have sort of a standard, and some of them have wanted to chop so much that it was not gonna pass state approval because we've taken out requirements. So that's the other thing we have to balance, which is, there are certain things we have to say in the letter. But it doesn't sound like what Judy is suggesting is gonna make it, not
No,
follow.
I'm
I think it's
on
just
board for
clarifying,
like
it's totally
2
good.
or 3
We will work on that. Yeah,
the
I
value.
want the value.
up top and then, yeah. we
But
can-
I just want to, okay, so we are in, now we're moving into the resolution now.
Yeah.
Talking about the education
Although I did want to.
operation plan. Was there something else?
On the legislation? Yeah, there was more stuff on the legislation, but anyway,
We are, you know,
We
we're
are
going to meet again, so we can have further discussion on that.
right.
Let me move to Tom now, Judy. Tom, did you have anything that you wanted to say? Okay. All right. Anybody else?
We
Danielle?
have a question regarding the letter. If we make it very complicated and use complex language, we have to translate it into other languages.
Okay.
So we want to keep it in
Simple.
plain, simple English so that people.
All right, that's a,
Oh, yeah, there, and actually Judy asked that too. There is an FAQ that goes in the letter as well. And we're
oh,
working
good.
on,
Okay, great.
yeah,
Great,
and we're working on translating the FAQ right now,
What
yeah.
are other municipalities doing with the translation? Are there certain partners that
The-
they're working with?
So, no, at this, so let me explain where we are with the translation piece. So, first of all, we're translating right now the FAQs into Spanish, and we're working on Mandarin as well as our top two priorities. And the reason that we've started there is because the concept is complicated, and as no one on our team are the other native speakers, we have no way to check if the concept has been translated correctly, and so if it's going to be more confusing or less confusing or what have you. So that's one of our concerns. We don't quite know how to manage that in terms of direct translation. So we need someone that we can sort of talk to, explain the concept, and then have them translate it, if that makes sense. So then the other thing, we talked with National Grid, and what we learned from National Grid is that they are sending, every bill they send in Albany is in English. And which is a little bit, so the way the language for CCA is written is that the CCA administrators are supposed to mail in the primary language as provided by the utility. So we called National Grid and asked them, and National Grid said, well, as it turns out, we only have to provide a language other than English if 20% of a population in a county has a language. So I think that we might want to just talk about outside of CCA, because to me personally, that's an access issue that is outside of CCA. But so that is their requirement. So they are not going to be telling us. So therefore, everything that we mail will be in English because we won't know what language any individual would get it in. Now, Marisa did send me your RFP for translation services that's out now. And so how that would interface, it's going to be awarded in plenty of time. So exactly if that means that that could get folded in, but I still think it's going to get mailed in English because their bill is in English. So then I don't know what our step would be. And so if you can help me understand what we should, I think we could put stuff on the website maybe, and people can come go get it there, but it's going to be mailed in English because we don't have the data, is the problem. So that's where we are with that. We're not done with that conversation, but that's where we are currently.
okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
And now, did you have other comments, Judy, about the implementation plan? Or questions?
The legislation.
The legislation.
The local
I'm
law.
sorry, the legislation.
So one of the questions is whether or not we include language in this that creates a CCA program for gas. And so my gut is take it out because it's confusing and it's in the context of some of the other goals of this at this time, and I don't think it's currently feasible really. So.
No one has done it yet. They're starting to do it on Long Island, but no one has done it yet. But it's the same process, but it's not going to be a renewable product.
Right.
But it would help with that. Gas is much worse in terms of the fluctuation, but that's up to you. All of our municipalities have left it in so far, just again, because of the concept of, we put a local law on our books.
So I defer to other committee members whether you think that is confusing, whether we want to automatically authorize the city to do that, or whether we would want it.
I'm fine
What are-
taking it out. I don't see any reason not to.
Okay. I made a recommendation for, instead of saying that we're creating an opt-out CCA program, that we're actually creating a CCA program that will include an opt-out option for customers. I thought that that was, again, a little bit more positive. We're creating a CCA program,
Okay.
period.
I think that's great. You have any thoughts, Tom, on that? Yeah, anybody? You have that? Okay. Where is that, Judy?
That was actually in the definitions that you were
Okay.
calling that out, actually, I think, right?
376-2F.
376-2F, okay.
Right. And actually, it's 376-4 is where the definitions are. So that was not part of the definitions.
Yeah, and the reason, and I explained it in my response to you, the reason is because CCA is an opt-out program. There isn't another structure of CCA. But I understand that if you're wanting to have this be read and as an educational tool or a clarification, then there may be, but that is why it doesn't say it, because there isn't anything other than an opt-out CCA.
Okay.
But you're welcome to clarify.
So there was
Can't hurt.
also a question about the letter. So
Yes.
we actually put some stuff in the legislation about the letter. Now, we have a recent experience with residents asking me about extranet, that they got this letter, and it was like, there's not signed by anybody, no contact, title, information, etc. So the interesting thing is, I assumed that the opt-out letter, that CCA would be involved in it, but it seems to me as though what you were saying in your response is it's actually the ESCO that would be the contact point for information about how to opt out.
Yeah, you don't want all of your residents calling the city. Don't think.
Well, no, I thought it would be you guys.
No,
As opposed to the city.
Yes.
We don't have their data.
And so
Okay.
I actually thought, putting in the legislation that there would be a title and a name that people could call, because my reaction is that Chris Spencer's going to get a call, or...
Chris is going to get a call, more than one.
Or the mayor is
Mayor's also gonna get a call.
Get a call because this is
Yeah.
on city
Yes,
letterhead.
and she will sign it.
And doing something a little bit more than just putting the telephone number in
Mm-hmm.
there seemed appropriate. So I actually wanted to put in the legislation that there would, this letter, which seems to me to be common sense,
Mm-hmm.
that there would actually be a name, title, an address for, and
Mm-hmm.
telephone, and contact information for the person that would answer questions,
So you have
that...
to update your legislation though every time you,
No, I don't think she's talking about specific names.
You're
She's
not
talking
talking-
about
I'm just
the
saying
fact
that
that
the letter
they're
will
requiring
say-
the letter.
oh, requiring that the
include-
letter has that, I thought you wanted the name in the legislation.
No.
So
no.
my
I'm saying the legislation will require the letter to have a name, etc.
Right, so my question to you is, I wasn't clear if you meant someone at the city, which is currently designated as Chris.
No.
You mean
the
someone
ESCO.
at Mega,
The ESCO, no, the ESCO.
at
So
someone at the
include-
The
ESCO.
opt-out letter would require
A name,
a name.
a phone number, an email. or
But they're
whatever.
not, I mean, this is, so imagine, in a 30-day period, 90,000 households, some percentage of them are gonna be calling. It's not one person, it's the call center.
Okay.
So we're gonna know the ESCO's name, and we're gonna know the phone number, we're gonna have a web tool, and we're gonna have the piece of paper to mail in. But there's not one single person that's taking all those calls, it's 24/7.
So I guess we can't put this in the letter.
No,
Okay.
but you can't, I mean, to be fair, again, my comment was, let's edit the opt-out letter however you want as the draft, and you're gonna approve that as a resolution, so that's sort of,
So it'll still be a draft.
you're still putting it in the record with the contact info, with X's and blanks, but
Right,
it's there,
right.
and we know it's gonna be in there.
Okay.
So I found this, the legislation seems to be written in a way, and John Raphael, this is something I'd like you to take a look at in section 376-6C, that new customers
Yeah,
are automatically not enrolled in this program. So my first question about this is, so is there a way for the ESCOs and the utility to tell if somebody, so I know in my ward, probably about 25% of the people have moved in
Yep.
and out in the 6 years I've been on the
Sure,
council.
yes.
My ward is not as transient as many of the other wards. So my concern is we could lose a large amount of the cohort by creating essentially a requirement for opt-in for everybody who moves. The first question I have
Sure.
is, would that only apply to somebody who is moving from outside the city? Is there a way for the
For the ESCO, you can just call it ESCO.
ESCO?
That's what we call it, yep.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
For
I appreciate the
ESCO to
acronym.
know, like, would somebody moving within the city be an automatic default enrolled in the supplier that we have selected?
Sure. So let me back up and address your first issue, which you were asking about. So the legislation is vague because New York's order allows the administrator and the ESCO and the city to determine if it's an opt-out treatment or an opt-in treatment with the new people. So Mega has decided that anyone we work with, whatever ESCO we choose and whatever municipality we choose, in our implementation plan, it's very clear. Everyone gets the opt-out treatment. If you move into the city, you get the opt-out treatment. If you move across the city, and every time there's a new account number with a new name associated, even if someone gets married and they change their name, it's the same thing that's gonna happen to them, right? Because the utility thinks they're new. And if they're new and the city has this program, then they're in, right? But, so the reason the legislation is written that way is because, again, the legislation is written to follow the order. The order gives all kinds of options. And another administrator, or 5 years from now, the city might, even if it was with Mega or with someone else, might do something completely different. So the legislation was written bare bones, and then the implementation plan fleshes it out.
So the interesting thing is, when I read it, I read what we have in our legislation as creating an opt-in, that there will be offered.
I agree with you. I read it and I was like, wow, that's weird. And then I was like, oh, and it's not. That's not how the structure is. And so if we want to clarify, because we think, why would we ever do it a different way?
So John Raphael, I'd like you to work on clearing up the language in.
It is not clear. I agree with you.
-6C to make it clear that everybody's in an opt-out kind of situation.
So then let me
New customers are in an opt-out kind of situation, unless the city makes,
There you go.
a determination otherwise.
Okay. Sure.
But that is going to be the default
Right.
for us in our legislation.
Great.
Because I want it to be clear
Right.
that I'm with you with where you're supposed to be when
Yes.
you're thinking.
Yes. And I want to address you were asking about losing a percentage of the cohort, recognizing in your ward the turnover. So what we do, so the utility, there's lags, it takes time, but what we do is right now our model with ESCOs is 3 times a year. So we get the data, because it takes, think about how much time it takes. They have all this time to give us the data, then we have to mail the letter, and then so we're doing it about 3 times a year, and that's what most people in New York State are doing. And that catches pretty much everyone within at least 3 months of their coming into the municipality.
So you're saying, when you say you're doing it 3 times a year, you're saying you send them the opt-out letter.
Only if they haven't opted out before. So if someone lives at the same house and they opted out, we're not going to send them another chance to opt out. They are not included for the time of the program.
Even if they've moved?
No, if they move, they're a new customer.
Okay.
So, I'm sorry, we just made that really complicated really quickly. So someone moves into the city, someone moves into the city. They're going to get an opt-out letter within 3 months of moving into the city. Okay? If someone moves across the city and they get a new account number from National Grid, they're going to get an opt-out letter within 3 months of signing up with National Grid again, opening their account. right? So, but what's not going to happen, and I know this is a concern, is that if someone has opted out the first time, we are not going to mail to them every 3 weeks another opt-out letter. Because, right, they're not in the program. They've told us they don't want to be in the
Right.
program. We respect that. They're not going to be in the program unless they call and say, I would like to be in the program. So I just want to clarify, because I know that's something people think, that when we say we keep mailing, they're like, oh, we keep mailing the same people. No, it's just new accounts. And it also means that if someone is with,
But
yep,
once somebody has opted, has not submitted an opt-out letter,
Mm-hmm.
you're not then sending them notices, giving them the choice later on.
no, once they're in the program, they're going to be in the program until it ends, unless they opt out.
Unless they.
Which
but
they
if
can
get a new account number. then
Correct.
it's- Okay, so that's with the presumption that every time somebody switches addresses with National Grid, that National Grid gives them a new account number.
That's right.
That's what the presumption is.
Exactly.
Okay.
Or it happens, I mean, National Grid will tell us, like, plenty of people within a household, for whatever reason, will change it to their partner's name. And if that happened, they're gonna get mailed a new letter, because National Grid doesn't know, oh, that was your partner, or that's your mom, or they don't, National Grid doesn't know that, so they're like, that's a new person. Then they say, mail the letter, right? So that's how it works. So it's basically, if the account number and name are different associated, when Grid pulls the request, they're gonna tell us, mail the letter. So, because otherwise, we have no way of knowing. Yeah.
Thank you.
Oh, and I just want to clarify, the other thing, it's not just moving in. Say someone was with an ESCO outside of the CCA, right?
Oh, yeah.
And the contract ended, or they canceled it because they were like, I got to get out of this deal or whatever, they're going to be eligible then too. So it's not just moving. There are other things that might trigger it. Yeah.
All right.
That was a question.
Tom?
If somebody, right now, I think you can go to National Grid and say, I don't ever want to change.
A block, yes.
So how does this, would they then get, okay.
No, they are respected. That block, and as a matter of fact, if people call and they're very upset now, they're like, I don't like this program, I don't want anything to do with this program, that's what we tell them. We're like, call National Grid, put a block on your account. We do not want you to be unhappy and angry between now and September.
So
Like, just
that's an
call and put a
option.
block on your account, and then you will not even get a letter. National Grid is gonna see you as uneligible. But that's a very good point. That is the other, there are so many little possibilities that are, whatever percentage of the population. And then what we have happen is people call and they say, why didn't I get a letter? And I say, we go through the things. No, that's not it, that's not it, that's not it. And National Grid does not tell you on your bill if you have a block on your account. So sometimes they'll say, call National Grid, find out if you have a block on your account. And they'll call back and say, I have a block on my account, I forgot. That's why you didn't get a letter.
Okay.
So, yeah, that's a thing, and people should
Yeah, I
use it
wasn't
as a
familiar
tool.
with that.
So I think that this has covered my substantive issues, including we need to do something about us having the approval of the ESCO. I do want, and I will share with John Raphael, some proposed language that would actually put in the legislation that the initial contract would not be for, would be for between 12 months and 36 months. Again, there has been a concern that, even though you're saying
Yeah.
that, I think there's a concern that we want it to be something like a pilot program so that people can maybe not be as
Worried.
concerned.
That's fair.
Right, and again, that's one of the reasons why putting it in the legislation that people have the ability to opt out without penalty or fee anytime is important. But John Raphael, you might have noticed that this is not codified in the way that our code reads with the Part A and that kind of stuff.
It's not.
So that kind of stuff needs to be addressed. And also any place where it says municipal governing board, I think that is intended to refer to the common council, and there should be that substitution.
Okay.
So
Yeah, and that's my apologies, because the letter, that's a general template law, and most municipalities don't have this dual structure that you all have. Most folks have just their, council, and that's it. And
Right, the town
chief
board.
elected is, or the,
Okay.
And the mayor's part of the
Exactly.
board or something
All
like
right,
that.
if there's nothing else, I'd like to move into public comment. And
Oh,
then
wait,
so we
wait.
will be,
Wait, so that's on the
Moving again on the 20th.
legislation. That's on the legislation. So we've talked about the letter. I do want to talk a
Yeah, we'll
little
talk about
bit
this
about the
plan.
education plan.
yeah.
okay, go ahead.
I would be The resolution says, here's our education plan. I would be more comfortable if we actually had an education plan attachment that says, here's what is happening before we enter,
Right.
with regard to education, before we enter into an agreement with the ESCO, and then here's what's happening with regard to education afterwards, with regard to the ESCO, and have, because this resolution is talking about, and the intro to this plan is talking about educating people about the opt-out. Well, we're not going to educate people really about the opt-out until after we have the ESCO, and right now the education plan doesn't look like it has
Yeah.
any education going on. So in terms
Yeah.
of our responsibility for actually having an education plan, I don't think that this is a huge fix.
Right, I think we can just change the title of the document, which we did in another municipality, and then, because the purpose of this document is not to plan after, it's not to plan after step 5. The purpose of this document was that committee, both of you were there, we sat down and we planned what we were gonna do in the first 60 days. And now we're executing the first 60 days of that
What is the
plan.
PSC expecting us to have?
They're expecting to see 60 days of education and outreach with multiple methods. That is it. And then that's.
So they don't really require an education plan for the opt-out portion of it.
They do, that comes later. So they're expecting, because it's a multi-step authorization from them. So the first thing that they have to see is that you've done 60 days of education and outreach in multiple methods, that you have a draft opt-out letter that you've approved by resolution with the municipal letterhead, and that you've passed your local law. So that's step 1. They see that, they're like, okay, great. That means that you can get data from National Grid to go out to bid. Then they require, before I can mail the letter, I should tell you this actually. So before that letter can be mailed, you all have to approve it again, right? The blanks get filled in, you approve it again. The state has to approve it again, and they have to approve the second period of education. So we go through this whole process twice,
another
really.
resolution?
Yes.
Are we talking about-
Well, I mean,
however
you may
we-
want to,
or
however,
however
whatever
we
you
do
want to
it.
do.
Okay.
I mean, everybody does it slightly differently.
Oh, okay.
So I would like the resolution to clarify also that this is the education plan for prior to actually,
Prior to the local law or prior to the,
right?
yeah,
Okay.
bid, prior to the bid is probably accurate. Because we are going to have things on here, and I can tell you from today, the neighborhood associations that reached out, we're going to have things that are extending beyond your local, if you pass your local law on March 2nd. So we probably just want to say like pre-bid or something like that, because it will keep going into the end of March.
And is there okay, so that would be,
So that would be after your local law, so that wouldn't be accurate
So
then.
just
can that
some
be
sort of-
changed in the title then?
Yeah, I would change the title is what, and I'm sorry that we haven't just categorically done that.
Okay.
No one noticed until this round, believe it or not. It's been through like 30 municipalities, and the town of Bethlehem was the first one to notice. They're like, this is not accurate title. And I was like,
Bethlehem knows too?
they were the first ones to notice. Yeah, we changed it for
Prior.
them. So no one else
So
noticed.
it was, okay.
I don't like changing documents after you all have them.
We've got a
You
lot
know?
of.
Do you have that suggested
government
language?
They
workers
just,
who look at these
yeah,
kind of things.
yeah, exactly. They just changed it, they called it, details of City of, Town of Bethlehem Education and Outreach, and that's all it was. Because it was clear in the resolution for them, that's all they did. They just took off plan, that's literally all they did.
Oh, I see.
But we can do whatever makes sense, or you can change the resolution, like Judy's suggesting, to add language into the resolution to suggest that this is the first round of education and it's only before the, the RFP or whatever,
Okay.
that might be a good addition.
Okay, John? Raphael, you have that?
Yep, I'm writing it all down.
All right, thank you.
All right, thank you.
Okay.
Is your neighborhood associations, have meetings? Or are they scheduled, do you know?
Helderberg is.
Helderberg's, okay.
Oh, and Pine Hills.
Pine Hills, do you have Pine Hills?
Yep, they're on the 20th of February.
Okay.
I will be with
didn't
you.
look at the-
One of my colleagues will be with them. Katie back there will be in Pine Hills.
Pine Hills, and Park South.
They just
Got
emailed
Park South.
today, yep.
Okay, where is Helderberg?
They're the 18th of March, so they were a later, because what, do they only meet every 3 months or
Every
something?
other month.
Every other month?
And what's the other one? Oh, yeah, Julie Ellison and.
Woodlawn
New
still meets?
Scotland. Well, they haven't met in like 6
Oh,
months.
that one is not, they are not on our radar. If you would like to poke them and put them on our radar, that's great. Tom, are yours
Eagle
on there?
Point.
I have communicated with Vince, he has not confirmed yet. So,
All right,
there's a lot of activity today.
Thank you so much.
so
You're
we'll meet
welcome.
again on the 20th.
Yes, I will be here.
Okay, terrific, thank you.
You're very welcome.
And we're going to enter into public comment now, and thanks, Chris.
Sure.
And I'm going to ask you to keep it under 3 minutes, and because there are other opportunities, we are going to have a public hearing on the 20th, and so you'll have an opportunity to speak then as well. First speaker is Bill Reinhardt. Welcome, Bill, if you want to come up and just stand here.
Sure. Okay, in 3 minutes, I'll try to cover all the ground I heard the discussion about today, or at least somebody will. I was going to talk about some of the things that were already mentioned by Mega about no penalties, the opt-out option, and the security of the personal data. I guess the point that I'd like to make, and I should say, I wear 2 hats in this task. I'm a county legislator representing parts of Bethlehem and New Scotland. Both communities are participating in CCA, and they were some of the early players in it. I'm also one of the directors, along with David Hochfelder, who lives in Albany, of Solarize Albany. And Solarize Albany is working with the Capital District Regional Planning Commission, who I'm sure Mr. Spencer has worked with. Did he leave? And so we are working with the Regional Planning Group, the CDRPC, on Heat Smart, on CCA, on clean energy communities, and climate smart communities. And so we will go around and we'll talk about rooftop solar, community solar, even the wholesale solar markets, to educate the public about all the renewable energy things that are going on in the region. And the point I want to make really is that you've heard Mega, who is kind of like the entity that is the focus of the CCA. But in addition to that, there is not only Solarize and Capital District Regional Planning Commission, but there's the steering committee, which Tina and I are a part of, which is now called Capital District Community Energy. We have representatives, obviously, from Solarize Albany, from the Sierra Club, from the Climate Reality Project, Bethlehem Tomorrow, many community organizations who are actively engaged in encouraging this. They're talking about it in their communities. We are available also, along with Mega, to go show up at some of these events in the city and elsewhere. I've already given presentations in Bethlehem, Guilderland, Park South with Tina several months back, and other places within the 8-county area where all these different municipalities exist. So we are all, very excited about it. We are also, I'll call it eyes and ears to make sure everything runs well. Megan will hear from us if it doesn't. So that's, I just want you to understand that when you're considering what you're getting involved with here, it's all of these communities, all of these groups in all these communities around the Capital District who really want to see this move forward as a major piece of dealing with the climate disaster that's impending. And I can talk for way more than 3 minutes about that.
Bill, thank you. Thank you very much.
Yep.
Really appreciate it.
Okay.
I'd like to invite Mary Belby. Mary, how do you pronounce your last name? Bilby? Bilby, welcome. Please feel free to sit down if you'd like to.
I'm Mary Bilby, and I'm representing the League of Women Voters of Albany County. And like Bill said, there are a lot of groups that are interested in this endeavor. The CCA goes along with a lot of the positions of the League at the national, at the state, and at our local level support. And last night, we finally got around to passing a resolution to support the adoption of a community choice aggregation as a way to encourage generation and use of renewable energy sources. And like Bill said, we can be a educational part of this. We're getting into it a little late because we have to go along with the positions that have been adopted and study it ourselves. But we urge you to approve this for the City of Albany. I think it's be a great thing to encourage more solar and renewable energy. And especially the cost savings for people with lower incomes. The Solar Choice Program.
Oh, good.
That's it.
Thank you very much, Mary. I'd like to call up John Wright.
I'm actually going to pass, ma'am, if that's okay.
Sure, thank you, John. Tina Lieberman.
Hi.
Hey, Tina.
I know this committee has heard from me before. So when I first heard about community choice aggregation, it was about 2.5, 3 years ago, and I was very skeptical. I heard about it at a renewable energy fair, but I wanted to learn more. And as I totally understand how long it takes to ask enough questions and get enough answers to feel comfortable with the program. But I have found that it's probably the most benign ESCO program there is. I mean, I personally signed up and was taken advantage of in a predatory ESCO because I signed up as an individual and I didn't understand, you know, when they say one thing about price, I didn't understand that it was really it was more than I thought. It was going to keep going up. And this is not like that at all. So I just really want to make that point that here the price is fixed. There's never any penalty for opting out. There's never any penalty for opting in. You know, the Public Service Commission, I think, really established something that would help basically counteract the predatory ESCOs so that people could bond together in a group and get a really good price. And what excites me most about this, being very much into our environment and very much concerned about the fact that basically our earth is on fire and our electricity sector counts for 1/3 of our greenhouse gas emissions. This is really a way to deal with that in a very effective way that also can help people with their pocketbooks. You know, I can't sign up for renewable energy at this price. The price that we can get from an ESCO, the competitive level of price. I can't get that. So trying to sign up individually. This is the only way I can be part of it. I can sign up and get 10% off through community solar and all that, but this is really just a really effective way to deal with the situation with climate, and a way that we can do our responsibility, take on what we have to do as a community to help with that, and reduce our greenhouse gas emissions on a big level here, and like a one fell swoop. I know that from Solarize, so Bill was just here from Solarize, and I remember when Dave came here and he said it took him 5 years to get 100 people to opt in and sign up for community solar or for solar panels on their roofs. 5 years.
Oh, wow.
And what we can do here in the course of, basically it'll all happen in one fell swoop after all this preparatory work and education and outreach is reaching out to 90,000 people and giving them renewable energy unless they don't want to be part of this. More renewable energy than they would get with National Grid, and then that choice of maybe even 100%. It depends what the prices come in at. We might get 100% renewable energy at a price lower than National Grid's average historical rate. So I wanted to make that point. And the other part is, I think this historically helps people who have signed on to a predatory ESCO and don't even realize it, like senior citizens and other people, because they can actually bring their bill, get some advice, see what the price is and what they've been paying, and they will learn that they can see that a lot of them may have been overpaying. So that's a very important thing that this does. It teaches people. There's so much outreach and education that's going to be going on about this, that people will become more aware of their electricity bill and what they're paying now. And then I met with the Affordable Housing Partnership, and we talked about co-promoting solar for all with this, so that that's a program for income eligible people, so that they, whether they're on HEAP or not, maybe they're not on HEAP, maybe they're on SNAP, but they can get an even reduced rate on top of the CCA. And sign up for some of NYSERDA's programs that they don't know about. And again, those are opt-in programs, so it's very hard to get that information out, but we can use this opportunity to co-promote that. And for people who aren't income eligible, they can get an extra 10% off by signing up for community solar. So this gives us a lot of great avenues for educating the public about ways they can save more on their electricity bill and go renewable. So I just wanted to put that out. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Tina. Christina and Joe Wiley. Okay, thank you. Eileen, Christian. Welcome, Eileen.
How are you?
Good.
I just wanted to say a couple things. I feel like I got some questions answered here, and I feel a little better about, the fee that I was hearing about on social media, that's not true. And I'll be sure I make sure I post that too. But I do have some concerns about the education avenue, and as you're probably aware, our family, not me personally, but family members own a lot of property, and I am involved with managing some of that. And I think the education for our tenants is key, and to get information out to the property owners so that they can pass this on to tenants when they're signing a lease. We have a lot of people that are new in town, some people that have language barriers, as you discussed, that we would be able to at least provide them with educational material as much as we do about the snow emergencies, things like that. We try to make people aware. I'll send out a text to everybody if it's snowing, make sure you move your car if there's an emergency, that type of thing. So I think that would be something that we really have to think about, is getting the property owners that have multiple residences, that they would be able to get this information out to their tenants in an appropriate manner, even if they come in later, like you were discussing. And then I also think it's great to go to all the neighborhood association meetings, but I think there's other avenues such as PTA meetings, schools, library, RISE. If we're concerned about language barriers, that would be a good start on how to get that out to the community. And also, even if we just have a message in multiple languages that says, you can turn here if you can't read this document, much as we get with our explanation of benefits with insurance. You get messages in multiple languages. Go here for more information if you can't read this letter in your language. So, because I know we have a Karen population. There's a lot of people in Albany High and that speak, what do they have, like over 30 languages. I know it's almost impossible to get something out and everything. But
That's a good suggestion, thank you.
And I just wanted to say that the one thing that I have issue with in the blocking I don't like my information going out to people and a decision being made. It's just me. That's how I feel about it. Doesn't mean everybody does. I know there's a lot of great things that have been said here about, raising awareness and also doing better for our environment. And that's all good things. But I like the idea that we don't include the gas in this legislation, because I think it is a pilot program and everything sounds good until it's not. So, it is new and things change. And I just have one question. Who looks at the bids? Is it the state or does the city? I was confused about that.
The city.
It's our
and
city
administrator.
city community aggregation administrator, who will look at it and evaluate it and then provide information. And I've asked that it be provided to us, the Common Council, along with the mayor, so that we're informed. But then it is up to the municipality to make that decision finally. Nothing happens without at least the mayor's office being involved, and we were talking about having another group.
An
that
advisory board that will include the council, mayor's office, and community advocates.
That would review the bids.
That's what we're
and-
talking about.
Okay.
Still information.
And then also who signs the agreement? I mean, obviously general counsel reviews any agreements that come through the city, but will everybody see that agreement? Or
Yes.
who's going, okay,
An
on the
agreement is-
council?
An agreement is foilable, and it would be, and the mayor has the authority to sign agreements and bind the city.
Okay,
So it would be her signature.
so, but it
Unless
would be
she's
up
delegated.
for review before that signature
Oh, yeah.
occurs? Or okay, just wondered how that
Because
works.
that's what we've been talking about tonight is making sure the council's involved in this decision-making process. So then it'll be very public.
Okay, all right, well, thank you.
Thanks, Eileen.
Have a good night.
All right, thank you everyone for coming. Any other comments before we close?
I do want, Tina said something about this would be an opportunity for people who are in predatory ESCOs to become informed about maybe their contracts and opt into this. So I found that interesting because my understanding is that people who have an ESCO, I'm not sure, you have this opt-out letter, they wouldn't get an opt-out letter. So how would they become educated about that?
Well, for example, right now, all the education we're doing, when you go to a neighborhood association, they don't know when you show up that they're not included, right? So that's actually a point of contention for some people. They're like, I already made a choice, don't take my choice away, right? And the answer is, we're not taking your choice away, right? But so people are learning, but one of the things that happens is when we put the price in the paper, when it goes on their website, when all that, then people look at it and they say, like, Tina, you said that you did this yourself already with your renewable electricity. Look at the price. It's like, whoa, that's a big spread. And so that's part of what she's talking about.
I might have bought from the same supplier.
Right. It's a large spread. And so people look, because we don't talk about this every day when we go to the mailbox or when we go out to lunch. We don't talk about what we're paying, and no one even looks. So then we talk about where do you look on your bill, you know, we'll make another cute YouTube video, where do you look on your bill, you know, and what's the price, and then they look and they will say.
And I get
oh,
calls all the time from
Right.
ESCOs that are asking me to go and get my National Grid
Right.
bill. But in the meantime, I have talked to my friends who have worked at the PSC, and they basically said, none of the ESCOs are really going to give you a better price than National Grid. So, you know, but
you just hang up on them. Or you play with the game with them if you're like me. You're like, well, let's talk.
or you can say, I'm going to go get the bill
Yeah.
and put the phone down, go back to my computer work. Because after all, I'm on do not call list.
Right.
Okay,
How'd you get my number anyway?
all
So
right.
does that answer your question, Judy?
Yes.
Yeah.
All right, thank you, everyone. I'd like to have a motion to end the meeting.
Motion to adjourn.